Grant me strength, please guide my way onto the path of my deen. Allah, subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah, I'm calling your name. Oh, Allah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Welcome to another episode of Let's Talk on your favorite channel, Huda TV. I'm your host, Arqam Rashid. In this episode, we will take a look at spirituality in Islam. Does it exist in Islam? Does it have a place in this religion? And is it important? So let's start off by welcoming and introducing our guest. On my right-hand side, brother, if you can give us your name, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself. Go ahead, inshallah.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullah. My name's Idris Tawfiq. I'm here with my family in Egypt. I'm in the process of trying to learn something about this religion, inshallah. And alhamdulillah, me and my family are benefiting a lot here.
All right, it's always wonderful to welcome you on the show, Ilyas. We always have lovely conversations, almost weekly.
Yeah.
So once again, welcome to the show. Brother next to him, if you can give us your name, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself. Go ahead.
Thank you. My name is Omar Dunlap. From the UK, 22 years old, and I'm currently in Egypt trying to study Islamic studies as well.
All right, welcome to the show, Muhammad Tal. I believe this is your second time on with us on Let's Talk.
Indeed it is.
We're looking forward to this conversation as well, inshallah. If we can come over to this side, brother, if you can give us your name, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself. Go ahead.
My name is Idris, and I'm from America. Ladon, Yankee here, I guess.
Right, I'm from the US as well.
From the guest. And I'm here in Egypt studying Arabic and memorizing Quran and teaching English at the same time.
All right, it's always lovely to have Americans on the show. It's always lovely to have you on the show, Idris. Seriously, we have wonderful conversations almost weekly with Ilyas as well. Brother next to him, if you can give us your name, where you're from, and a little bit about yourself. Go ahead.
My name is Muhammad Ishaq. I'm from the UK, Birmingham, and I'm a student out here studying Arabic.
All right, Azak, I believe this is the first time you're joining us here on Let's Talk. I'm looking forward to this conversation, and I hope you also enjoy this conversation and can benefit the viewers here, inshallah. So, I mean, after getting to know the panel, today's topic we said was about spirituality. So let's start off with something very basic. What does it mean to each and every single one of us here? So, Ilyas, if you can start us off with this.
It's an important question. It's for me, spirituality, when it comes to my mind, I believe, or the first thing that comes to my mind is taqwa. You know, and defining taqwa, you know, sometimes we translate it as being God conscious or having fear of Allah. So all of those connotations come to mind. For me, spirituality is just being aware of Allah and the fact that He's watching you, and you know, doing everything with that in mind. You know, so if you think of the Prophet ﷺ would say Bismillah before he put everything in his mouth. When he ate, for every morsel he would say Bismillah. Now for us, sometimes we'd say Bismillah and we just rip through the plate, don't think of Allah again. But the Prophet ﷺ would always say Bismillah before every morsel of food. So it's just being, you know, aware of the fact that Allah's watching us. But for me, maybe this is a Western influence, but spirituality also gives feeling of sense of love. You know, sometimes when we just say Allah's watching you, it just emphasizes, you know, that fear aspect, that we should be afraid of Allah. Obviously, we should have that khawf for that fear of Allah. But spirituality also, to me, connotates a feeling of love and attachment with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. So, don't want to say any more, it's okay, take answers from everyone, but that's what comes to my mind. That's what comes to my mind when I think of spirituality.
Okay. We're going to go to Muhammad. Muhammad, what comes to your mind when you think of spirituality?
Immediately that comes to mind will be the example of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Before he was given prophethood, he was someone who went to the cave, he reflected quite a bit. And that's a part of spirituality. It's about reflecting on, you know, around you, you know, seeing what is wrong in the world. And I feel like many kind of ills and damage that's been done to the world today can be linked to lack of spirituality. So that's what it means to me.
All right, that's a very good take on it as well. Let's come over here to Idris. Idris, what does spirituality mean to you?
For me, it's a huge word that can mean many different connotations, different directions. But I guess immediately when I think about spirituality, I think of your soul's journey to try to find nafsul muta'anna, you know, the completeness in you, this journey that you're taking For me, that's what it means basically in all aspects of your life, of how you are trying to include Islam in your daily life, whether it be eating, like he said, or whether it be going to work, or whether it be talking to your wife, your family, your mother, or whatever it may be. How can you include this into your life? Not just that, going to work is a mundane act. How can you turn this into part of your nurturing your soul? That's what spirituality is to me. I mean, of course, there's more topics and it can be going
Of course,
a
it's
different
very
way.
vast itself. Isaac, if we can come over to you, spirituality, what does that mean to you when you hear it?
It's a good question, and I think that when I asked myself this question, when I sort of started on my journey, I actually asked myself, rather than what's spirituality to me, the question was, what is spirituality and where am I in regards to spirituality? Because I didn't want to look at it as in a way, sort of a particular. It was actually a universal. There is this spirituality regarding the spirit, and where am I with this? And I think that everybody has a level of spirituality that they've experienced or they know about. Most of it's experience, and knowledge sort of tries to make sense of certain things, but a lot of it's experience based, and we all have already experienced it. And then there comes a point where you want to know a bit more about this. And just like many questions that we have, I asked myself this question was, what does my religion say about this? And how will it teach it to me? Because in the Quran we have everything that so I wanted a sort of a map. There's Islam, I know this, and where does this thing of spirituality and whatever he said it so like there's so many different names for it. You know what I mean? And you can, different groups would have different names. And I love what Brother Mohammed also said about this journey, because that's what I believe it is. And I believe that. And then I eventually found the map, which was the hadith of the Prophet ﷺ, the tradition of Gabriel, where Jibreel alayhi salam just laid down the whole thing. And I think in that, it was so beautiful, because me as a person, especially when I was sort of studying with my teacher and I asked many questions, sorry to go on a bit, but I think this was important, was I asked him this question regarding these things, and he said to me, he asked me, do you know yourself? And who are you, and how can you identify yourself? And I'd like to pose this question to all of you guys to think, and the viewers as well, to question themselves as, who are you? And you start off with this aspect of this sort of body, and you go with your name and your face until you realize, well, my name can be shared and my face is changing, it can't define me. Then you go to your beliefs, and then you say that's your mind, but it's still not your definition, because it's something changing, and a definition can't be something that changes until you come to the essence, and you just say, how do I differentiate myself from the people here who are present? It's ultimately my spirit, my soul. And then you understand that we are a composition of this mind, body and soul. And then you look beautifully at this tradition which told us the Islam, Iman and Ihsan. And you link each one with yourself, and then you start to understand fiqh so much more, because fiqh is my practical body and the application of it. And then the knowledge is how much I'm studying in my aqidah, and that's my mind and how that works for us. And then there's this spirit, and it's about feeding these three things. And that's when, so coming back to the question is, what is it to me? It started to make me aware of who I am, and where am I in relation to this. And it's a vast thing again. I probably still haven't answered the question, but I'll probably stop there, because I feel I've spoken enough.
Just to share some thoughts, spirituality to me, it's nourishing your soul, the ruh, or the non-corporeal side of you, the side that loves, that cares, that feels. And and you can feel this many times that you describe it. Sometimes people describe, well, I have an iman rush, or I have an iman high. And they feel at that moment that, their connection with God has increased somehow, whatever they've done to, get that sort of iman rush or iman high at that moment. But you can feel the spirituality taking place or taking effect. Let's move on to the next question, which is, why is spirituality important? And if it is important, then what happens to people who don't have spirituality? Can you differentiate with people that don't have believe in any sort of spirituality? You can say, Ilyas, we can start with you, inshallah.
Is spirituality important? Well, going by the definitions of spirituality that we've had by all of the brothers here today, is very important, because, I said it invokes feelings of taqwa. So obviously taqwa is important. Muhammad, you mentioned that it's, a consciousness, if I can use that word. It's a consciousness of, what's going on around you and, reflecting on whether it's good or bad, etc. So that's a big part in our daily lives. And he mentioned that the Prophet would actually step away from the corruption and the evil actions of what was going on around him. And so all of the answers that were given today really shows us some of the core points of Islam. Prophet Ishaq mentioned Islam, Iman and Ihsan. It doesn't get more fundamental than that. So spirituality is of grave importance, because spirituality is all to do with what happens to us after we pass away from this life. So what is more important? That's what we've been created for. We've been created for paradise. So we can't downplay spirituality now. I believe, coming from the West, that the whole concept of spirituality is lost somewhat. We've become very secular in the way we think, the way we behave, the way we look at things. For example, in Eastern countries, there's a big emphasis or a big issue of magic. A lot of superstitions, etc. But in West, you don't really have that. You don't take it seriously as other countries do. And
it's not like the West was burning witches or anything.
Come a long way.
Or recently, exactly. Come a long way, okay. So I believe that, one of the grave issues we have is a lack of spirituality. And the fact that you said that we have the Iman rush is a big indicator of that. Because we don't do enough to feed our souls. And that's why it becomes very easy for Western Muslims, I can only talk from Western Muslim perspective because I'm a Muslim from the UK, it's very easy for us to become distracted with arguments. This scholar said this scholar said that, I believe this, I believe that, and I'm not praying tahajjud or what have you. It's very easy. We don't feed our souls enough. And I believe that plays a big role in sometimes the lack of Iman, the lack of voluntary deeds. Sometimes if we just cover the basics, I pray 5 times a day, that's enough. Or I pray all my 5 at the end of the day, that's enough. I fast on Ramadan, that's enough. But we don't actually sometimes do the extras that were so easy to the Prophet ﷺ and the companions, because they had their spirituality intact. And sometimes when we look at spirituality, we kind of look at it from a negative connotation. This person's got his head in the clouds, or he's floating on a magic carpet, or it's very negative if you think of spirituality. But in reality, we need to make the real bridge. And we find that so many people, why can't I have khushu in my salah? Why can't I do this? Why am I, we have all of these issues, because going back to spirituality, it's the link between our souls and the Creator. And once that's lacking, then we're going to find that our day-to-day aspects of Islam will also be lacking. So spirituality is very important, and the lack of spirituality can lead to us having problems in our faith and our day-to-day aspects of Islam.
It's interesting that you mentioned that many times when you, especially with the students of fiqh, what you notice is that many times when you get deep into fiqh, you realize, well, this is optional, that's optional, this is optional, and you start to know the details and the rulings. And you start to only do what's required from you, just the basics.
Exactly.
And you start leaving.
I'll give you a perfect example. One brother, we were doing fiqh, and he found out that the surah after Al-Fatiha, don't need to recite it.
Famous one.
You don't need to recite. And he said, for a long time I just stopped reciting after Al-Fatiha, just Al-Fatiha and then Allah Akbar, and then that's done. And he said that some of his ibadah became dry. But it's not a problem with the fiqh, obviously, but it's a problem with the person that's studying it. So it's a good point.
And many times people forget that the fiqh isn't there to tell you, what you just read Fatiha and just move on. It's actually there to tell you that, well, your salah won't be valid without this bare minimum. It's there to explain the bare minimum that's needed or required for a salah to be valid in the case of salah.
So we can so we can say that really this spirituality, it turns Islam. Without spirituality, Islam becomes do's and don'ts. Do this, don't do this, and then then you hear people say, don't worry, it's just sunnah. You've heard this before,
Mamadou, we're going to pose the same question to you, inshallah. Why is it important?
I think, just echoing what Brother Ishaq said, I feel like you are a spirit and you have a body. And I feel like in our day and age, we kind of forget that we are just a spirit. And to echo what Brother Ilyas said, is that it's about our connection to the Creator. And I find it in a day and an age where there's so many ills in the world and so much, carnage that goes on. All there is spirituality, in the sense, you might have someone in the UK or in the West, where people from around the world look up to that person, where they've got a lot of money, they've got a lot of material wealth, they've got a lot of, dunyawi things for the dunya, and they're not happy. How many celebrities do we hear who actually take their own lives when you think they've got it all? They've got fame, they've got money, they've got everything that the dunya tells them to have. And you see someone in a third world country, for want of a better word, I hate using that term, but someone in a poorer country,
Developing country.
Someone in a poorer country who hasn't got all these things and they're happy.
Smiling.
And they're smiling. But why is that? Because their spirit is content. And I feel in an age where, it's about getting this and it's about getting to the next one, and, it's about capitalism, and there's so many, so many madnesses in the world, that being content is so rare nowadays. And, so I kind of feel that's why it's so important.
That's a very interesting take on it as well. Idris, I'm going to come over to you. Idris, why do you think it's important, spirituality?
Sort of can echo just what they were saying already, because in reality, it's the essence of what you're here for. It's to build this connection between you and Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, because at the end of the day, everything else is small as compared to what your connection with Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is. Because when you will come a day when you find that you're facing Allah, it'll be you and Allah. So fixing this at the end of the day is the most important thing. And how do you fix it? It isn't by just bowing your face without understanding. You have to connect your heart to what you're doing. And how do you connect your heart to what you're doing? Is by understanding and building this relationship through spirituality. So for me it's essential. Without it, you become a Muslim robot with no adab and no akhlaq. Because usually when you don't have spirituality, you lack the understanding of how to act towards other people, and you have this this disconnect. So it's to me, that's why it's the most important thing. It builds that complete picture.
We're going to get Isaac's thoughts, and then after that we're going to watch a short video. Isaac, what do you think? Why is it important?
Yeah, I think the brothers really were probing the essence of it, and I think that the essence kind of has been explained best by the Prophet ﷺ, in which it was described, as I already previously mentioned, about the Islam, Iman and Ihsan. But what it shows to me is that it's actually a third of the, and I love it. It's so amazing, because it's showing you to be balanced. It's a third of it, but it's not a third where it's disconnected. It's completely connected in every act. In every act that I do, there's 3 dimensions to it, and I love how Allah's made us 3-dimensional beings as well. And it's fascinating. I'm also a mathematics teacher, so I'm going to get a bit mathematical with it. But I love how, Islam is like this x-axis, this horizontal axis, and we have these 5 pillars.
You lost me at math.
Oh no! You gotta stay with me here. You gotta stay with me. You've got these 5 pillars. And then you have this y-axis, which is the knowledge, and it builds these 5 pillars. My prayer is a basic prayer until I learn how to pray in certain ways and know about God, and then it becomes so much more. And it's like the x and the y-axis. But then, and that's the 2 dimensions. But where's this 3rd dimension? And we have this in mathematics, which is the z. So we have this
Z, you mean?
Z. You have this breadth, you have this height, but then you have this depth. And I think that's fascinating, because we have in our tradition so many times it's mentioned about people doing very simple acts, but they were the acts that got people, made them successful in this life, which shows the essence, how important this is, that first and foremost, along with, we have Islam, and it's all part of this ladder that we're told to get those pillars, then to know God, but then to, how was it mentioned? It was mentioned best by the Prophet ﷺ, to worship Him as if you see Him. And if you can't see Him, know that He sees you. Like, that's exactly what these guys have been mentioning. To get to the essence of it, to be like, if I miss a certain thing out, for example, from about fiqh, but you disregard one aspect of it or something like that, or you change up your prayer, then how will I still face Him? And I also like how the fact that it's not, it goes from very external to very internal. and how Islam being or how we perceive things to be external mechanisms for us to check how our Islam is. Because that's what the Prophet ﷺ said after, that he came to teach you your religion. So how our religion is, we use external mechanisms, and at the start we need those. But as time goes on, we need to use ultimately what's inside of us, which is the internal mechanism, which is the state that you were talking about, which is that I might be completely in my fiqh, completely sound, and I might be doing my 5 pillars, but I still don't feel like I might even feel like I'm disrespecting God. How does that happen? It's all about a balance, isn't it? And I think that and that shows that it's one of the foundations, 3 foundations, and got to remember it anyway. I think.
All right, we're going to continue this conversation, but right now we're going to watch a short video clip, so stay tuned.
How perfect my Allah is, and I praise Him. Subhanallahi wa bihamdihi, Subhanallah. How perfect you are, Allah, Subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Common mistakes when it comes to Islamic meditation, the proper practice of dhikrullah. Well, the first and most common mistake is a lack of proper understanding of how to practice Islamic meditation, how to practice dhikrullah in its most effective and efficient forms. Another mistake which is commonly made with dhikrullah, with Islamic meditation, is a lack of intent, a lack of consciousness, a lack of awareness. Oftentimes when people practice Islamic meditation, when they make tasbih, or when they even make muraqabah, a lot of times it's unconscious, it's unaware, it's lacking the intent that can truly take that practice to a much more powerful experience. And really what we're talking about is a lack of presence, being distracted by the dunya, being distracted by the world of form, the world of appearances, and all of our obligations and duties and troubles and problems that come from dunya. Being distracted by that and then failing to get the very benefit what Islamic meditation was for, to liberate us from that. And lastly, there's a lack of understanding of the purpose of Islamic meditation or the purpose of Islamic spirituality itself. Oftentimes we just practice these things unconsciously as an obligation, but we fail to understand what is its very purpose and how can I achieve that quicker? How can I experience that in this life before we reach the grave? So by failing to understand Islamic meditation, to learn how to practice it properly, we can ultimately fail at understanding the purpose of Islam. See, the Prophet ﷺ said, 1 hour of contemplation is more valuable than 70 years of worship. In one of the previous videos, we spoke about the experience of Iblis and how he fell from grace and ultimately became labeled as Shaitanur Rajim, the rejected, the cursed, because of his rebellion. He worshipped physically, externally, for aeons, for ages, yet he didn't spend an hour in contemplation, an hour in meditation, to realize the very purpose of his physical spiritual practices, of his religious obligations. And hence, all of his religious obligations, all of his prostrations, instead of cultivating humility, gratitude, consciousness in his being and his soul, led him to pride and arrogance, and he fell. And that's the danger that we run into with Islamic practice. If we fail to address the internal dimension, the meditative dimension, the spiritual dimension of Islam, and only carry the physical dimension of Islam, we run the risk of entirely missing the very purpose of Islam. And one of the greatest dangers is that we can lose complete relevancy of Islam. We can lose Islam, God forbid, ultimately, and it just becomes a form, a part-time religion like many other religions nowadays. Islam is relevant and it's designed to impact and affect and accentuate every aspect of our lives.
Allah, Subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah.
Welcome back. I hope you guys enjoyed that short video clip. Now, continuing our conversation, Ilyas, let me start off by asking you, how do you think Islam tells us to be spiritual? In what ways? And what are some good ways we can increase our spirituality?
First and foremost, Islam or Allah wants us to have a very close relationship with Him, you know. And there's so many narrations of the Prophet ﷺ. You know, the ones that really come to my mind is that if you walk towards Allah, then He runs towards you. So this really emphasizes the fact that if we make an effort to have that spirituality and have that relationship with Allah, then Allah will make it easy for us to do that, or will facilitate the means of that to happen. So there's so many, like we said, there's so many narrations that just, me personally, I believe that every single ayah, every single hadith that we hear or read that pushes us to increase in goodness is a push towards spirituality. It's just going back to the essence of our reason for us being here. You know, if we can't really be good worshippers of Allah if we're not good with His servants, and you know, if we're not really not have good relationship with His servants. Something that Idris mentioned earlier on about someone who, you know, may have all of the knowledge, etc., but they have really bad adab. You know, that is so far away from spirituality, because it's not just about knowing Islam, but it's about living Islam. You know, it's about, you know, Islam and Iman and Ihsan just becoming fundamental in all aspects of our lives. You know, it's so important. You know, as Brother Ishaq mentioned, to worship Allah as if you see Him. And subhanAllah, when we think about it, we always think of, I wouldn't do anything bad. But at the same time, we should think of, we'll be doing everything to the best of our ability. We'll be the most amazing people. So it just goes back to the point of us looking at spirituality from a positive perspective. You know, Omar radiallahu anhu told us to call ourselves to account before we're called to account. So, you know, when we think about it, there's so many aspects of Islam that encourages us to be spiritual. Whereas sometimes I believe that it's lost because sometimes we focus on doing the action rather than doing the action well. You know, I've done my prayers rather than how well were those prayers done. I fasted Ramadan, you know, maybe I was watching videos all day, but I didn't eat. And Ramadan just becomes some time not eating or drinking. You know, the Prophet ﷺ told us, if your Ramadan is going to be, you know, if you're going to speak bad and treat people badly, then Allah's in no need for you to leave your food and your drink, because the deeper meaning of Ramadan isn't simply just abstaining from food and drink. So if we look at all of the prohibitions, all of the obligations, etc., they all have that deeper meaning. And you know, Islam wants us, Allah wants us to find that, you know, that deeper meaning so that we become better individuals. So just really summarizing, I believe that every ayah, every hadith that pushes us to do good, you know, is an increase in spirituality. And again, without it, Islam just becomes actions. You know, and it's not needed, because, you know, anyone can, you know, raise their hands, put on their chest. Anyone can do that. You know, anyone can do that. Christians pray, Muslims, every religion prays. But there's something about Islam that makes it different, because everything's connected. Your belief is connected, your attentiveness is everything's connected. And so it's about having that link between the Creator and ourselves in a way that is just perfect, that is just in symmetry with the whole universe that's been created around us. You know, why are we here? Why is the earth rotating around us? Why, you know, when we start to ponder on these questions, you know, then inshallah all aspects of ibadah can improve. You know, it can improve. And so just one more.
Yeah, sure, of course.
Go ahead and just talking here. But you know, the example of the man will come on the day of judgment with, I think it's 500 years of ibadah. Perfect. You know, no, you know, showing off, etc. And Allah will ask him, do you want to go to paradise, or do you want to be held accountable for your deeds, or according to my mercy? And you know, after he's got those years in the bank, you know,
got money in the bank.
He's got money in the bank, you know. He thinks he chooses his acts of worship, and Allah will say, you know, just take the blessing of his eyesight and put it on the other side of the scale, and just the blessing of the eyesight alone will outweigh his 500 years of perfect ibadah, showing that the action in and itself ain't, you know, the Prophet said we can't do anything to guarantee Jannah, and it's even you, said not even me, except if Allah has mercy on me. And so it just, for us, it's really to find that, those acts of ibadah that have a real effect on us, so that we become, you know, affected. And sometimes you read stories of the older companions, you know, they read the Quran and they would cry so much, and we're watching, oh, why can't I cry? You know, Sometimes when the ayah was recited, is it not time that the believers' hearts were affected? Some people fainted when they heard the ayah. Sometimes we just hear it now, it's next ayah, next ayah, next ayah. So, Islam has such a great emphasis, but I believe it's lacking. We're not really searching for it. We don't have that thirst for it, That's why some of the Arabs at the time, or the Sahaba, they were searching for Islam, they wanted it. And that's why it had that deep effect on them. But maybe we're thinking of money, thinking of job, we're thinking of this and that. Spirituality comes second. And Islam, it demands more from us.
Very interesting. I actually have a couple of things I've wrote down that I want to share after you answer there. But before I do that, we're going to go for a short break, so stay tuned.
How perfect my Allah is, and I praise Him. Subhanallah wa bihamdihi, Subhanallah. How perfect you are, Allah, Subhanahu wa ta'ala.
Allah is my heart's speech. Your mercy is what I beseech. Keep in my heart your remembrance, and in your deen allow me to advance.
Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh. Bismillahir Rahmanir Rahim. I praise Allah the Almighty alone, and I send the best peace and blessings upon His most beloved Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him. Brothers and sisters, welcome to a live edition of your program, Ask Huda. I cannot pinpoint or determine the fate of any individual by name and say this person is in heaven or this person is in hell. This is not up to me. But we have the general guidelines and the ruling with regards to those who die in a state of Islam and those who die in a state of any religion other than Islam. Fatima asked, do ladies have to call the iqamah before every compulsory prayer? No, they don't have to call neither the adhan nor the iqamah. There are two different opinions, brother Abdul Latif, due to the understanding of the ayah, which says when Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala ordered the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wasallam to do the following. He said, يا أيها النبي قل لأزواجك وبناتك ونساء المؤمنين يدنين عليهن من جلابيبهن ذلك أدنى أن يعرفن فلا يؤذين. And the names of Allah, brother Abu Bakr, should be توقيفية. The term توقيفية means we do not suggest to Allah a name. We do not ascribe to Him a name based on our assumption.
Welcome back to Let's Talk. Now, before the break, we were speaking about how does Islam encourage us to increase our spirituality, Ilyas, and you gave us a wonderful answer there. And some of the points I wanted to comment on was that something that you said about what happens is that our actions or our acts of worship become a sort of, what we can say, just traditions. Or in better words, it just becomes repetitive movements. They no longer have any meaning to it. And I think the way Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wanted us to be spiritual, or the way He prescribed spirituality for us, was through these actions. So prayer, fasting, giving zakah, these things weren't there to see, they weren't just acts of worship. This is the core of spirituality. This is what God has sent to us and has given us to gain that spirituality, to nourish that soul. And an example of that you mentioned about fasting, which was it becomes hunger. People are fasting for 12 hours a day, some people, and at the end of the day they're just hungry. There's nothing they're gaining out of it. And when we go back to the ayah where Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala speaks about fasting, He says, يَا أَيُّهَا الَّذِينَ آمَنُوا كُتِبَ عَلَيْكُمُ الصِّيَامُ كَمَا كُتِبَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ مِنْ قَبْلِكُمْ. And then He gives a reason, لَعَلَّكُمْ تَتَّقُونَ. That so that you may feel that taqwa, that you can gain that taqwa, that consciousness of God, that He's there. And we've described this awareness of God before, like the 3 different levels. But if you look at it in fasting, it's very interesting that the thing that he mentioned it with was taqwa. So that you may gain taqwa. Why? Because the whole day when you're fasting, you're withholding any sort of sin that you're supposed to be doing, alongside eating and drinking. And this is how you gain and nourish the soul. And that's just fasting. Then there's purification through the zakah that you give. Every year you have to give a certain amount if you have over the nisab. And this is a way to become spiritual. It's not just Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala wants you to give money. This is an actual way to increase your spirituality. Mamadou, I'm going to pose the same question to you. How does Islam tell us to be spiritual, and how can we increase our spirituality?
I think everything we do, as you made example, our worship is spiritual in its essence. But I guess with fiqh it can become quite dry. For example, if the prayer becomes I'm just doing the prayers, it's not spiritual. But then you have to almost reflect on what you're doing. I think the example of the Prophet ﷺ is that he was a person who reflected a lot, and he reflected within himself and people around him. He's known for he purified his companions around him. I came here to teach you the best manners, the best akhlaq. I was only sent to perfect your manners. And I feel like a way to increase your spirituality is just having an awareness of what you're actually doing. For example, when I'm praying, I'm not just praying, I'm talking to my Lord. They say the closest part you can get to Allah in this dunya is in sujood. And I know in some fiqh, they say that you can make a dua in any language. Sometimes they're just like, subhanallah, you're like, no, Ya Allah. You're talking to your Lord at this point, the talk of the Creator. And I feel like Islam does encourage that, but I feel like with the way it is now, people are moving away from that. And sometimes, we said it during the break, but sometimes spirituality is for everybody. Every human being has access to spirituality. But I feel sometimes the way we are now, some groups hijack the narrative and think spirituality is only to one person, and therefore, it can be so simple. And again, I guess as well, the way our nature, we like to complicate things. And we say you have to, we give conditions of spirituality, you've got to have this. No, that's not like that. We don't need no conditions. We need to know that this is what, it's our essence, it comes natural to us. Being spiritual is natural to us. So that's my thoughts.
And I really, what's interesting, the thing that you mentioned about the closest a person is to God when he's in sajda, when he's prostrating in front of God. And just that phrase itself is so deep. If you just think about it for a moment, that the closest you are to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is when you're in sajda. Can you imagine what you're supposed to do in sajda? Many times we just quickly go into sajda, Allahu Akbar, Allahu Akbar. What happened? Why is sajda prescribed? Why did the Prophet ﷺ tell us that the closest we are to Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is when we're in sajda? If we just think about it for a minute. Idris, I'm going to come over to you and give you the same question here. What does Islam say about spirituality, and how can we increase our spirituality?
For me, kind of bouncing off some of the things they said, is that the first thing I think we as humans need to know is that Allah is not in need of your worship. Okay, worship is for you. He doesn't. Your worship and your ibadah and your sajda doesn't increase His dominion, not even a minuscule amount. His dominion, His sovereignty, His greatness. He's not in need of you. The worship is for you, so that when you know it's for yourself, it's not because you feel like you're. This is one of the problems when people pray. They feel like they're offloading a burden. Like, alhamdulillah, I did my dhuhr, like they feel happy as if they did a deed. They're approaching it the wrong way. They're approaching the salah the wrong way. Salah is supposed to be something that you yearn for, something that you can't wait for.
It's supposed to give you that spiritual.
I'm going to speak to Rabbil Alameen. This is something that you should be like excited for, not like, oh man, let me hurry up and get this done. As if I got food, I got all this stuff waiting. When you finish, you should feel sad, like it's over. Wow, I miss it already. Because this is the feeling it should get to you. If you're doing anything other than that and it doesn't bring that feeling, you're doing it wrong. So first of all, know that ibadah and this feeling is for you. It's not for Allah. And second, if you want to know which actions to do, I've said it many times, and you know this. Study the seerah from a trusted source. How did Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam? How did he get closer to Allah? If you want to increase your spirituality, how did he do it? Understand who it's for, and how to do it, and how he understood it. then you'll find your way through it.
What's very interesting is that, sorry,
No, go ahead.
not trying to cut you off, but what's very interesting is many times people think that they need to do something different and something extra in order to gain that spirituality, whereas Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has already given us means to gain that spirituality through the things that are fara'id, such as salah, zakah, saum. These are prescribed to us, and the biggest and probably the best way to be spiritual. And many times people say, I'm already doing my salah, now I need to be spiritual. Now I need to gain spirituality. I'm already doing my 5 prayers, I'm already doing my fasting. Exactly, there's something wrong in your fasting, in your 5 prayers, if that is not enough for you to be spiritual, because that is already a means for you to nourish your soul. If it wasn't enough to nourish your soul, then Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala would have prescribed you more.
Yeah. Just one last story, a point is that if you think about, it's a wonderful story, one of my favorites, is about, Amr bin al-As' son, Abdullah bin Amr. And if you know the story about when he got married, first of all, he was one of those, the youth that was in the Abid. He didn't really, he didn't even want to get married. He was just a worshiper of Allah. This is all he cared about, all he wanted to do. So his father actually grabbed him and told him, no, you're going to get married. His father encouraged him, and he ended up getting married. Okay, I'm summarizing because it's a longer story.
Sure.
But to the first night of his marriage, he told his wife, okay, please, just allow me to make 2 rakats, and inshallah, okay, after we'll be together. So imagine, first of all, a youth who has this yearning that any youth will have. We're all men, and the Sahaba were real men. Yeah. They were real men. That's not cool. The thing that they were real men. So you have this. Most of us would have been like I heard a sheikh once say that most of us would have been praying. I don't know if I prayed 3 rakats, 5 rakats. I don't even know what I just did because you're so nervous and everything's all going on in your head. So he begins to pray. He told her this. He begins to pray. So during the salah, he just takes off, and he totally forgets until the Adhan al-Fajr. And then his wife is like, what happened, man? And he's like, I was there, and you know what? Okay, just forgive me. So tomorrow, I have to fast. So he told him, so he's fasting in the daytime. The second night, the same thing happened. Allow me to make 2 rakats. He takes off and totally forgets that he's even married, and he totally forgets. Isn't that he's neglecting her? He's just totally forgot. The third night, the same thing happened. He totally forgot. Then Amr bin al-As saw his daughter-in-law, and he asked her, how's my son? Mashallah, he's newlywed. How is he? And she was like, you know better than me. I don't know. He's your son. I don't know anything about him. I don't know. So then that's when the famous story where Amr bin al-As comes and he grabs him by his son and he drags him to the Prophet and said, do something with this guy, he's driving me crazy. So this is when he told him that, that the body has a haqq, your family has a haqq, and Allah has a haqq, so you have to separate it in the beat. But the point is, how many of us have forgotten something in Salah? Most of us are remembering what we should be doing.
You remember stuff in Salah.
I forgot, I didn't do this. How many of us forgot the dunya for Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala? I mean, this is a great act. This is spirituality to me. I mean, to the point where you're there. You totally forget your wife on your wedding night, not because you don't remember her, but just that you're so connected to Allah, you just forgot the dunya.
I even heard that as an advice, if you lose something, go and pray. Because you remember it whilst you pray.
Just to quickly clarify something I said earlier about what Allah SWT has prescribed us to reach spirituality, which is the 5 prayers. It does not mean that we do not increase our worship. Now, that's what I said earlier. Somebody might take it as, okay, well, if I'm doing this, that means I don't need to increase anything. Obviously, once you reach a certain amount of nourishment of the soul, then you want to increase it. You want that feeling. You want your iman to go higher, so that it keeps going up. But to think that the 5 prayers and fasting and zakah, these things that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has prescribed us, it's not going to make you a spiritual person, is completely wrong. Right. That was my point there. Isaac, I'm going to come to you, pose the same question to you, but let's exclude the math equations here.
Because I was going to go into fractions. No, I was going to say, I mean, subhanAllah, so many amazing points were mentioned, and I think like really, subhanAllah, the viewers definitely must be really enjoying this because there's so much advice that's being shared. I mean, that story was, I mean, subhanAllah, things that I mentioned really interesting. I had a lot of points that I wanted to mention in each of them, but I didn't want to interrupt anyone, so now I've got this big map in my head, so I'm going to start and then inshallah I'll work my way through.
Equations for us?
No, simplify the equation. Get the jokes there. There's too much maths jokes. Bad for the spirituality, I only joke. SubhanAllah, I mean, I think like what you've just said about the last hadith, that it really just shows about like once you've separated the three aspects, then treat them accordingly and know what you're doing for each one. You need to know what you're doing for each one. With your body, there's a way we check our body and we're making sure it's healthy. And the same thing with your mind. See, if you eat junk food, then you're not going to be healthy. And so your body is going to be unhealthy. And with your mind, the same thing. If you're just entertainment and you're not challenging yourself and you're not, part of mathematics actually, this is really important, it's part of mathematics. Like the kids ask, why do we do mathematics? Or am I ever going to use this equation?
I think adults ask as well. So.
No, I don't know. They do ask this question, and I feel a lot of mathematics teachers didn't give the correct answer.
Even English teachers.
No, but the thing is no, we apply that, but with mathematics, it's more of exercising your brain. See, because those people who are good at mathematics, they're not applying all of the things that they've learned, but rather their brain is exercised in a manner, it's a healthy brain. This is why, interesting, I was reading an article yesterday about learning a language as well. How learning a language, and I see so many, especially with Arabic, so many similarities between Arabic and mathematics anyway, because it is like formulas and it's like the different forms of verb conjugations, you're putting in new and you're getting out different results. And each of them have different meanings, and it's just, I think it's fascinating also with the fact that we have Iman, Islam and Ihsan who happen to be on the same scale as well. And I think it's the fourth scale, Aslama as well, which is so Aslama and Ahsan. Ahsana to beautify, Aslama. It's so fascinating. There's not coincidence, and this is why Allah has not made us people who have it's not all simple. There is something so vast going on, and just like when I learned that, and maybe you guys were really intrigued by that, that's your mind saying, this is really interesting. That's what the children do when they're learning, is this is interesting, a love for learning. So later on in life, when you go on and you're living life. It's not just boring, it's interesting. Islam is interesting. The thing is interesting. And so, coming back to it, so then your mind needs to be healthy. You need to be knowing about the right things. If you have junk in your mind, then when you pray, you're going to be thinking about junk. You know what I mean? Like people just think, I want to get spirituality. You know what I mean? I got to get that spirituality.
We're out of time if you want to take a minute to...
But I mean, with Ihsan, it was just about, then check the spirit. And it's about checking the spirit. How's the spirit state? It's about checking each state. That was my point, that there are mechanisms to check them. The brothers mentioned them. And there are books like Purification of the Heart and things like that, where you're checking actual diseases of the heart is where the spirit resides. And things like that from the Quran about the state, and nothing will avail your children or your wealth except the state of your heart. And that's where the core of these things are. But there's a lot to say, and I think that's the show.
All right, that brings us to the end of the show. So I want to thank all you guys coming out here, joining us, giving us a wonderful conversation here on Let's Talk. Dear viewers, I hope you guys enjoyed and benefited from this conversation here. Join us many times on Let's Talk, many more times on Let's Talk, and don't forget to check out our Facebook page and our YouTube channel. And until then, may Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala bless us all. Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuh.
How perfect my Allah is, and I praise Him. Subhanallahi wa bihamdihi, Subhanallah, how perfect you are, Allah. Subhanallahi wa bihamdihi, Subhanallah, how perfect you are, Allah. Subhanahu wa ta'ala, Allah. Subhanahu wa ta'ala. I need you. Allahu Akbar. Allah, your mercy is great.